if people are going through a challenging time now where they are having their own what went wrong moments, don't beat yourself up if you find yourself floundering, okay? Don't beat yourself up if you even find yourself wondering whether it's even worth getting out of bed in the morning.
Welcome, listeners of the What Went Wrong podcast. I am your host, Tabitha Thorell, and today it is my great honor and privilege to introduce Simon Latter as our guest speaker today. I'm so excited. Today, just so you kind of have a little bit of background, I don't like to steal too much of my guest thunder, but I do want to give you just a little platform of who Simon Latter is. He is the vice president of Salisi Human Capital, has been since 2005. But what I really want to touch on, what I think is extraordinary, I mean, that's great. He's going to go into that. But he started a podcast in 2020. It's called The Conference Room. And it is now one of the top 0.5% of podcasts globally and one of Spotify's most shared podcasts in 2022 and 2023. So he is definitely doing something right. And he is definitely adding value to audiences. And so I'm so excited to bring him on. And I love where he's at and all of his success. But we all know that he did not start there. And we all know that there might have been a little rocky starts, roller coasters. So Simon, I just want to ask you, what went wrong?
Oh, what a great question. Okay, well, first of all, Tabitha, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I am Simon Latter. I am the Vice President of Salisi Human Capital. I started in recruitment and headhunting in 1997. So I was a co-founder of Salisi in 2005. And you can probably tell from my accent that I'm from the UK. Moved to the US in 2013 when we started the US office of Salisi, and basically been here in Las Vegas ever since. And so when people ask me the origin story of the podcast, I tend to kind of gloss over the what went wrong bit. So it's actually really refreshing to come along and be with you specifically talking about it. Because the sanitized version that I give is that when COVID hit, we were looking for other ways of connecting with our audience. So I started podcasting and it became an overnight success. But that's not really true. So so just between you and I and everybody listening, I'll tell you the real story. I'll spill the thing.
Give us the good stuff. Give us the good bits here.
I'll give you the good stuff. All right. So a teeny bit of backstory for you. So Salisi is a headhunting company that specializes in cybersecurity. Our clients are generally people in sales, in marketing, the, if you like, commercial side, the business growth side of the cybersecurity industry, not like the heavy techies and the propeller heads type of thing, right? So when COVID hit, suddenly our entire pipeline of business dried up. Okay, you probably remember, I mean, we're going back now nearly 4 years. Yeah, it's been that long. But you'll probably remember that back then, people had no idea how long this COVID thing was going to go on for, okay? And literally overnight, all of our business just dried up, okay? So we historically we had been very, very good at client retention. So we'd never really ever needed to become kind of heavy hitting marketers. It's something we never really needed to do. Most of our business was through word of mouth, through retaining clients. So going out and having to market aggressively was something we never really needed to do. Okay. So I decided I was going to put myself through digital marketing school. And so I started to learn about things that I'd never learned about before. Okay. I didn't know what funnel was. I didn't know what a landing page was. We didn't even have an email marketing engine. All these things we'd never really needed to do before. So suddenly I found myself in a world that I'd never really been exposed to before. And I did things like Russell Brunson's One Funnel Away Challenge. I bought books by, what's his name? Jim, something or other, his name I can't remember, Brandon Kane, and various other people, Gary V. So I started to really throw myself into this world. And one of the things that people talked about was pick a medium that you're going to really dominate, okay? Whether it's blogging or YouTubing or podcasting or TikTok videos, whatever it is, pick something and really dominate it. And if you don't know what that thing is, try everything, all right? And then once you've tried everything, you'll very quickly know which one really works for you, all right? So I'm not much of a dancer, so TikTok wasn't for me. I don't really have a face to YouTube, so YouTube isn't for me either. So I started blogging. Now, the problem is I don't have the discipline to sit and write a blog every day. And I had no real idea of what I wanted to write about. So I started to guest on other people's podcasts. And initially, I accepted any invitation that came my way, just through networking with people, being in groups. And I got a lot of requests to be on podcasts, primarily because I think people were intrigued by the whole, why does a guy like this live in a place like Las Vegas? Okay. So I ended up on a lot of podcasts, which was great. Okay. And there was one podcast that I went on by a guy called Rich. Okay. And at the end of the podcast, he said to me, "Oh, you're a natural at this." I said, "Oh, thank you very much." And head swelling up. Oh, fabulous. Yeah. He said, no. He goes, you should start your own podcast. So I thought, nah, I'm not going to start my own podcast. So I still kept going. I went on other people's podcasts, and a couple of other people came back and said, you really should start your own podcast. You're a natural communicator. So I thought, okay. So I did what everybody else would do in their right mind. You go on Google, how do I start a podcast? And all the articles that came back were all basically said the same thing, which was talk about what you know. Okay, so I thought, right, okay, what do I know? And it's a very small list, by the way. So I made a list of all the things that I knew. And top of the list was, well, at that point, I'd been in recruitment for 23 years. So I thought, okay, I'll do a podcast about recruiting. So I decided, right, what I'm going to do, and again, all the so-called gurus say to do this, I'll record 4 or 5 episodes, I'll batch record the first few, put them up there and see what happens, right? So I thought, okay, fine, I'll do that. Now, in my spare time, I have in the past done a little bit of editing, like birthday videos, that kind of thing. So I did know my way around video editing software. So I thought, okay, what I'll do is I'll record all these videos, 4 or 5 of them, then I'll edit them, and then I'll put them up and see what happens. So I sat down, wrote down a bunch of titles, right? I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about this. And I'm going to record them all, and then I'm going to upload them and see what happens. Fine. Very excited, very professional. I am now a podcaster, and I'm an expert, and I'm going to talk about this amazing expertise I have in recruiting. It's going to be fantastic. I remember this was in the August of 2020. I recorded over the course of 2 days, 5 episodes of my podcast. I recorded them, about 15, 20 minutes each. And then I thought, okay, well, I'll leave it and I'll come back and I'll listen to it, the following day and see how they sound. And they were awful. They were terrible. They were so curlingly horrendous. Okay. And fundamentally, it was because they were boring. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, I'd like to think I'm quite an engaging personality, and I'd like to think that I can hold my own in a conversation. But oh my goodness, those 5 were so soporific, so devoid of any excitement or energy. They were honestly, it was literally like listening to watching Jell-O solidify. It was that exciting. Okay? Paint drying would have overtaken me in the polls. Seriously. So I thought, right, okay, clearly podcast hosting is not for me. That's what went wrong. All right. I really, and I hadn't quite figured out what had gone wrong. I just knew that it had, because that was not what a podcast could have been. Let's put it this way. I struggled to listen to them. I was the bloody host. All right. How on earth I could promote and get other people to listen to it, God only knows. All right.
That's what the gurus told you to do, right? Talk about what you know and it'll be successful, right?
Exactly. It just shows, they say those that can do, those that can't teach, and those that can't teach PA. Anyway, so I licked my wounds, put my aspirations of being a podcast host firmly in the rearview mirror, and continued guesting on other people's podcasts, which I did through the summer and the beginning of the fall, until I got an email from Rich. Remember him? He was the podcaster from the beginning. And he said, I'm doing another podcast about blah, blah, blah. I'd love for you to come on. Okay, great. So yeah, sure, no problem. So I came back on. And at the end, he said to me, so how's your podcast going? Have you launched it yet? I went, oh, Rich, mate, I tell you, it's not for me. It's not for me. He went, no, you're a natural. You should do it. And he said to me, you got to remember that most people that are successful have had a couple of failures along the way. And he said, I'm sure in your other endeavors that's been the same. Why would podcasting be any different? I thought, okay. So he said, no, definitely, you've got to find something that you're going to be passionate about, and then that'll be the secret sauce. He said, and this was what really stuck with me. And he said, almost as a flippant comment, he said, at the end of the day, when people listen to you, they're not necessarily listening to what you've got to say. They're listening to the energy with which you say it. I thought, okay. Anyway, so I went away, had a think, and I was very lucky that through all the various sort of outreach and social sort of engagements that I was doing, I managed to bump into someone who was a friend of a commissioning editor in one of the big TV networks. Okay. And I said, I wonder if I can have 10 or 15 minutes of this guy's time just to get advice, bit of mentorship, that kind of thing. So I wrote it. So basically I said, hey, can you put me in touch with him? I'm not going to try and sell him anything. I'm not going to try and pitch him anything. I just want to get some advice from him. And he said, yeah, sure, no problem. Anyway, so my thought was, NBC, CBS, Fox, Hulu, Disney, all the big networks, streaming services, Netflix, whatever, all spend millions and millions and millions of dollars investing in shows. Now, some of those shows are going to be successful. Some of them won't be, but they're putting a lot of resources into shows to hoping they're going to be successful. Now, they're not just going to throw money at something without having done an awful lot of research and determination beforehand, because as we know, there are lots of pitches and scripts that don't become pilots, and lots of pilots that don't become shows. Okay, so I thought, I wonder if I can understand what that process is, to then be able to determine how to, if you like, reverse engineer whatever podcast I'm going to do, reverse engineer it to be successful. Okay, so I managed to have. I asked for 15 minutes. He was very, very kind. Gave me a little over an hour. And in that time, what he said was, first of all, they do an awful lot of research to determine, number one, that there's a demographic, and number two, that the show, whether it's entertainment, information, news, sports, whatever it is going to appeal to that demographic. Okay.
Yep.
Now, once they've done that, and this is the really key thing, they make sure that there is consistency, episode after episode after episode. Okay, it's something that he referred to. I kind of changed it just to, because I don't want to give any to belie the confidentiality. But the phrase that I've used when talking a little bit about this is that all successful shows or podcasts enter into a contract with their audience, a covenant with their audience. Okay, let me give you an example. All right, Tabitha, what's your favorite TV show now or historically? What's your favorite TV show?
Oh man. Well, Friends was forever when I was growing up.
Okay,
Great.
same here. I love Friends. Okay,
Yep.
Matthew, we miss you. Anyway,
I know.
so, so the reason why you tuned into Friends week after week after week was because you knew that it was going to be a feel-good ensemble comedy where you'd get, Rachel being a bit ditzy, you'd get Monica being a bit bossy, you'd get, Joey being a bit stupid, Ross being a bit kind of either Ross's physical comedy or him being, a bit kind of,
Dry humor.
dry. That was what I was looking for. You get Chandler with the one-liners, all that self-deprecating stuff, right? You knew it was to be that kind of comedy, and it'd be a feel-good comedy, all right? If, let's say, one week you tuned in and suddenly it became a murder show where they're trying to solve the murder and there was no humor in it whatsoever, or in the middle they suddenly break out into song and it became more akin to an episode of Glee, or they just gave you a sports report, right? You'd be like, hell's this? Now, if they'd built up enough goodwill from you, you'd go, okay, well, that was one bum episode, I'll tune into the next one, all right? What springs to mind is, a favorite TV show of mine is Breaking Bad. There's one episode of Breaking Bad that takes place entirely in a lab with a fly, and it's almost the entire episode is the two main characters trying to kill the fly. It was a brave episode, not one of my favorites, but it didn't stop me tuning in the following week because it built up enough goodwill. However, if I'd only ever seen one episode of Breaking Bad and thought, hey, that was really good, and then tuned in the next week and watched the one that wasn't, I'm not going to tune into week number 3.
Right.
All right? And that's the thing. The secret to successful shows is, number one, making sure there's a very good product audience fit. So determining the size of the audience and then fashioning the product, the content, to appeal to that audience. And then secondly, making sure that you are consistently delivering the same format of show, the same quality of show, episode after episode after episode. Okay? And that's what I came away with. So I thought, right, okay, how am I going to do that? So the other thing that really struck with me, going back to what Rich said, was passion. All right? Now, I will call out, not by name, every single podcast guru that says go with what you know, because frankly, it's nonsense. Okay? And I'll tell you why. Okay? I'm going to give my age away now. I have approximately 48 years experience of putting on socks. Okay? I put on socks every morning for approximately 48 years. Okay? I can do it standing on one leg. I can get my foot in the right way and it'll stop at the toe. All right, let's keep going and break it. I'll get it over my heel and everything. Right? I'm really, really, really good at putting on socks. I would say if you're going to draw up a list of world experts of sock putting on, I'm going to be on that list. All right? Because I'm really good at it. Okay? But would I want a podcast about it? Probably not. All right? Expertise does not necessarily lend itself to being good content, but passion really does. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, you may see just over my shoulder, there's a shelf over here that's got some whiskey, some single malt whiskies on. There's a bottle of Glenfiddich over there. There's some other ones down there. Over there, actually behind my head, you can see me and my late father outside 3 different distilleries in Scotland. Okay, and over there, just out of shot, you can't see it. I've got shelves full of single malt whiskey. All right. Now, if I wanted to, I could do a podcast about single malt whiskey. But do I know how it's made? Well, I know a little bit. Would you say I'm a world expert in single malt whiskey? Absolutely not. But am I passionate about it? Do I enjoy it? Am I intellectually curious about it? Absolutely. Right. So if I did a podcast about single malt whiskey, I'm pretty sure it'd be worth listening to. Okay?
Right, because your passion's going to come out in that. And even though it might not be an expertise top training on how to make whiskey, people are going to lean in and be like, oh, what's he talking about? What's next?
Exactly.
Holding their, they're captivated by that.
Exactly. And then what that lends itself to particularly is my own expertise, I kind of took one stage further and realized, okay, maybe am I an expert in recruiting? Maybe I've been doing it for a long time, but I'm also an expert in asking questions. Okay, being a recruiter means I professionally ask questions and have done for over 20 years. So being able to interview people in an interesting and an intriguing way, and to get the best out of people, that lends itself just as equally to recruiting as it does to podcasting. So I decided, right, okay, I'm going to do an interview style podcast, and I'd like it to be something that lends itself to the commercial world. So I'm going to interview business leaders. Okay. And I think the real joy that I had from episode 1 to whatever our latest episode is, I think it's episode 130, is my intellectual curiosity. I love understanding whether it's big picture. Interviewing, our very first episode was with the CEO of the US's largest independent chain of drug testing clinics. His name is Dr. Jonathan Bakhtari. Interviewing him, all the way through the various other CEOs and chief operating officers and chief business officers and chief marketing officers we've had, all the way down to interviewing an expert in email deliverability. Okay. We had on an expert in email deliverability who a few months ago, who talked about DKIMs and all these other weird and wonderful things that I knew nothing about. But what I didn't realize until we talked about it was how important these things are, and how important configuring your email inbox is. Because if you haven't configured your email out and sending is, because if you haven't configured it properly, your emails are going to get stuck in spam, which is going to hurt your marketing, which is going to hurt your business development, which is going to hurt your sales, which in turn is going to hurt your business growth. I found that fascinating. And that happened to be a very, very, very good, and not just a very good episode in terms of what I think my audience got out of it, but it did really, really well in our audience figures as well. By the way, his name is Scott Hartley. If you're wondering about your email deliverability, go look him up. He's a great guy. There you go, Scott. There's your plug. Yeah, go check him out. And that, I think that's really the difference. That was I don't like using the word aha moment, because it sounds like it was just something that occurred in a lightning bolt of inspiration, but building up from talking to Rich, trying it and failing and realizing why it failed, then deciding that I was going to try again, or should I say deciding that I didn't want Rich to beat me up, so I did it anyway. And then taking advice from various sources, putting all that together, and listening to people that weren't just self-professed gurus that are hiding behind keyboards and writing articles, but actually people whose careers live, that they've got skin in the game. Their careers depend on them making those kind of decisions, and then implementing it and seeing the results. And the results have been great. I mean, like you said, we started off from a standing start with, probably just my mum and my wife. Actually, no, not my wife, just certainly my mum listening. My wife is me all day. So we now are in, we went I would say probably the first 6 months or so, we were sort of fairly, sort of slow, steady growth. But then about 6-8 months in, we broke the top 10%. Then within about 6 months of that, we broke the top 5%, then the top 2%, then the top 1%. And for the last year and a bit, we've been in the top 0.5%. And that's where we are.
That is awesome. Well, I want to go back. First of all, thank you for sharing, because I know that you have a wealth of knowledge and you're excited and passionate about this, and I can definitely tell that. And I agree with you 100%. We all know a lot of stuff, but that doesn't mean that it should be on a podcast, or you shouldn't be talking about it on Facebook, because it's probably not going to always convert. So I love that. But I want you to take our audience, because we do serve a specific audience where, some people right now, they might be really struggling. We're, AKA in a recession, or, things are struggling. Maybe they thought they were going to be further along, or whatever circumstances, life. And so they're, or maybe they tried a podcast or a business and it didn't work. And they're thinking, man, I'm just going to jump ship and I feel this way. Take us back. Okay, you did those episodes and you watched them and you're like, oh my gosh, that's as boring as molasses. Like, this is crazy. And we can joke about that, but let's be real for a minute. Like, your livelihood, your business wasn't doing as great as it'd been, right? Like, it was going through some turmoil. And so that's probably a little bit shaky to your core because, what if you get fired or what if the company goes on? I mean, all of these things when COVID happened, everybody was like, we didn't know, right?
Yeah.
So you have that fear. And then you do this thing that everybody tells you you're going to be great at. And you're like, it's not working. And so then the self-reflection image comes out. Like, just take us there a little bit of like what that was like for you, like personally, emotionally, to keep going and then to even be on other podcasts too, because you had to question a little bit like, is this for me? Or, where are we at? I just want you to touch on that a little bit of that emotional turmoil. And then now where you're at, where you're like, man, like we're monetizing the podcast or we're using this as leverage or, whatever that is for you today.
Okay. So yeah, that's a really good question. The truth is that 2020 for pretty much everybody was a horrible year. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you were selling vaccines, 2020 and 2020 or toilet paper or hand sanitizer. 2020 was a very, very, very difficult year, and we had an incredibly difficult year. And luckily, we'd had a very, very good 2018 and 2019. So we knew that we had enough runway to get through 2020. But by the time we got to August, that runway was starting to look a little short. Okay. And so my emotional sort of stack of chips had all been pushed into that little cell on the on the casino table that said podcast. And I thought, yeah, this is going to be my way of attracting an audience. This is going to be my way of establishing authority. This is going to be my way of putting myself out there, and I'm going to get floods of people, floods of companies saying, "Oh, Simon's the guy. He's going to be the guy that's going to solve all our problems." And so, it's important also to understand that even though at this point I hadn't done all the research that we subsequently did for the conference room, I wasn't winging it. I still put in a lot of thought, a lot of, I bought myself a good microphone. I bought myself a good camera. So I'd done all the things that you would expect to do. All right. So there was a lot riding on it. And I have to say that I found the disappointment of the less than stellar results to be crushing. It really was. It was very, very hard to take, not just for myself, but also turning to my colleagues, my family, and saying, "Yeah, this isn't going to fly." Okay, so this lifeboat of me hosting my own podcast that's going to carry us out of these choppy waters into nice calmer seas. It's just not built for purpose. Okay, we're gonna have to think of something else. So yeah, it was an extremely challenging time, not just in terms of okay, now what do we do, but also accepting the failure.
Yep.
It was very, very hard. But you dig in, steel is iron that's been through a furnace. Diamonds are carbon that have been under huge amounts of pressure. And very often we are at our most creative when we are coming through the most challenging of times.
Yes. So what you're saying is in that moment, because when you first told the story, it's like, oh, I did this and it failed. And then I got this email. But in between that, is that real emotion. And that's what I want our listeners to hear is like, if you're going through something right now and you're in that emotional spot, that's right where you're meant to be. Because on the other end of that is the sharpened iron, the diamond, the business that's going to take off, the podcast. Like, just keep going, keep moving, doing stuff. Like, and I'm sure you didn't just stop. You kept doing podcasts, right? Like, you were the guest, people still interviewed you, right? And you were still in your business. You were still doing the things, I'm sure, trying to think of ways, in this COVID situation, correct? Like, you were taking action forward in some direction. It wasn't what you thought, but you were taking directions forward, trying things, and even trying the podcast, taking risks and putting yourself out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to remember that anyone that says that they had success overnight either is incredibly, incredibly lucky and incredibly, incredibly rare, or they work very, very hard over a long period of time to become that overnight success.
Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of the time, and I can speak from personal experience, and I'm sure this resonates with a lot of other people, whether they have actually achieved that success or it's still yet to come, that a lot of the time you don't know what you're doing. You're literally floundering. Okay. I can tell you during the summer of 2020, going into the autumn, we were floundering. It wasn't that I knew, right, I've tried this and it's failed. I'm now going to absolutely dedicate myself to doing that. There was no direction. There was just thrashing about. I was like the girl at the beginning of the Jaws movie. All right.
Yeah.
And where my arms and legs were just flailing everywhere. Because I didn't know what next to do. And I think that sometimes sometimes people regress going back to, well, I'll try that thing that I tried before. Well, it failed then, but maybe by some miracle it'll work now. Some people just don't know what to do and they become rabbit in the headlights. I'm sure that I did both of those things for a short period of time, and then I realized that that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Okay.
Yeah.
This too shall pass. 2020 and COVID isn't going to last forever. So I need to find a way to connect with my audience, and find a way so that when things do start to open up again, people are recruiting again, that I'm going to be there again to talk to. Interestingly, a lot of that happened in 2023. Okay. Many of the lessons that we went through painfully in 2020 came back again in 2023 when we had rising interest rates, we had the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, the collapse of crypto, and that, certainly for the tech sector where I focus, that really manifested itself in a significant slowdown. So a lot of the things that, the lessons that we learned painfully in 2020 helped us through what was, 2023, I would say, was even harder than 2020 was. But luckily, because we had the podcast, and that became the vehicle by which we were still able to communicate with our audience. So as we got to the end of the year and things started to open up, we were able to reap the rewards of it. So I guess the point I'm trying to make, I'm going about it in quite a long-winded way, but the point I'm trying to make is, if people are going through a challenging time now where they are having their own what went wrong moments, don't beat yourself up if you find yourself floundering. Okay? Don't beat yourself up if you even find yourself wondering whether it's even worth getting out of bed in the morning. Don't beat yourself up if you're wondering whether if you're even wondering what to do and find yourself doing nothing. Okay? The advice I would give, having been through it myself, is stop. Floundering is only going to be exhausting. Okay?
Yeah.
And take, whether it's an hour, an afternoon, a full day, and map out a strategy. Okay? Reverse engineer your success. Start from the end goal and then track back to what you need to do now. Okay?
Yeah.
That's ultimately what we did. It took us a lot longer than a day, but that's ultimately what we did with the podcast. And I have to tell you, if it wasn't for the podcast, then we wouldn't have survived 2020. 2021 and 2022 were phenomenal years for us, and it was the strength of those years that carried us through that last year. And we're now rebuilding, and the podcast being a pivotal part of that rebuild.
Well, I love that. Thank you, Simon, so much for sharing, going deep, because I love when people go deep, because that's where you find the nuggets. That's where you find the true tenacity and persistence. And that's what it takes. I mean, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're career driven or you're just trying to raise a family, you have to pull from those depths, from those hard times. So thank you so much. Well, how can they find you? We'll put this in the show notes, but just tell people, do you have a social channel that you prefer, or just I know the conference room is your podcast is your baby, so definitely check them out there. But is there any other places that they can check you out in?
Yeah. Okay. So first off, the conference room the conference room is on Spotify. It's on iTunes. It's on basically anywhere that you listen to podcasts. If you just search for the conference room or the conference room with Simon Lader, that's me. Alternatively, feel free to find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook. And when I learn to dance, you'll be able to find me on TikTok.
We'll get you on TikTok. All right. I love to dance, and I'm not even on TikTok. There's too many social platforms. It just takes up too much of my time. I got 5 kids and businesses. I don't have time for all these, for all the stuff, right? Well, thank you again so much for sharing. And I just want to remind our listeners that remember, wherever you're at, whatever is happening, that the what went wrong will always lead to the what went right. Just give it a little bit of time. So until next time, see you later.